Hi dearest friends, my name is Maylin and welcome back to my channel. I'm a flutist, music teacher, and performer now located in the city of Kamloops, British Columbia, and this is my channel where we learn all about things about the flute, so thank you for joining me here today. In today's video, I'm going to be continuing the series I started about the flute basics, and today we'll be talking all about articulation, so if you're interested then just keep on watching. As always, if you do have any questions throughout the video, please feel free to drop them in the comment section down below and I'll be sure to answer them as soon as possible. And also, if you are having any issues when it comes to practicing and you just need a little bit of help and guidance, feel free to check out my free practice guide, also located in the description down below. It gives you 8 easy steps to follow that'll help you to get more productive practice sessions. So I know it's been a while since we had a nice face-to-face conversation. Moving across the country was honestly a really great experience, but it was a lot more stressful than I had initially expected it to be. My furniture didn't come until the 26th of October, and I moved here on September 30th, so you can imagine how long I was without furniture. That's pretty difficult to film stuff when there's nothing to put the computer on and to set up the microphone. So thank you so much for your patience with me, and thank you so much for all the love that I've gotten with the flute cover I had arranged back in high school. It was so much fun to be able to edit that. It took quite a while. It almost took an entire day for me to just figure out how to edit it, get all the audio edited to the way that I wanted it to sound. So I really appreciate all the love that is coming from that video. So I actually, in this span of a month, I wasn't doing nothing. I've planned a whole bunch of new videos that I'll be recording in the next few weeks so that you'll be able to see them. Again, I'm going to be doing my weekly uploads on Sundays. My hope is maybe every 2 weeks to get a new music video out. So I actually have another flute arrangement for flute quartet ready. I'd actually already recorded it, but it wasn't quite up to my standards. So I'm going to re-record it again, hopefully today. And so you should be able to get that. I'm hoping to post them on Wednesdays or Thursdays. So whenever those come out, definitely feel free to watch them. It'd be really great. You can always click subscribe and then the bell notification so that you don't miss them. So thank you again for all of your help and support through this time, and I'm excited to be coming out with more regular videos again. So let's get into the video about articulation. Let's start by defining what articulation is. Articulation is the punctuation of musical language. It helps to define and communicate the musical ideas and phrases to the listener. Essentially, like when we're speaking, when we have commas and periods and exclamation points and question marks, that's what articulation is in music. So as a flute player, articulation is the use of slurs, accents, the tongue, and the use of your abdominal muscles or the diaphragm. So I'm going to separate this video into 3 different parts. So first we're going to go over some of the beginner articulation, intermediate, and then more advanced. So let's start with the beginner articulation. So the very first articulation I always teach my own students is something I call the hot articulation. The hot articulation is when you use the abdominal muscles or your diaphragm, depending on how you like to look at it, similar to a cough or a ha. The player uses a burst of air to create the note by using, again, the hot or the cough. So no tonguing is involved. This articulation can also be used when the player desires a less punctuated beginning of the note. So I'm just going to play an example of what the ha articulation would sound like on the flute. So I'm just going to pick C. So all I'm going to be doing is going ha, ha, ha into the instrument, and you'll hear that the note comes out, but it doesn't have a very clear punctuated beginning. So that's the ha articulation. A really famous usage of this articulation is in an orchestral situation. It would actually be Claude Debussy's Prélude à l'après-midi d'une femme. Hopefully I said that all right. It's a very famous excerpt. It's super beautiful. It's very thin when it comes to the orchestration. So when the flute solo comes in, you kind of just want to sneak in, and that's when this ha articulation is really great because you don't have that tonguing behind it that makes it really strong. So I will play a little bit of that just so that you can get an idea of what that sounds like. And so that's a very famous flute solo where the ha articulation is used. I also like to use the ha articulation when it comes to practicing the support of the abdominal system down here. So whenever I feel like I don't have a lot of the strong sound in my tone, I go back to using ha's. So this can be used when in any of your normal practicing, like if you're practicing scales, for example, instead of tonguing any of those notes, just try going it on ha. So I'm going to play C major, for example, with the ha articulation. And that's just a great way to check to make sure that you are using your abdominal muscles when you're playing your flute, because it's very important for a really, really beautiful, rich tone, as I went over in my tone video. So the next articulation that I would teach any of my beginners would be single tonguing. As the name suggests, the tongue is now added to the ha articulation to create a clearer and more defined beginning to the note. This becomes the default articulation if there is nothing specified in the music. Using your tongue along with the ha helps to define the very beginning of each of those notes. So what that looks like essentially is try and make a ta sound. Ta, ta. Think about where your tongue is touching when you make that note. So for me, my tip of my tongue kind of is where my gums touch my top teeth behind at the back. Ta, ta. It's essentially what you want to do when you play the flute. So again, adding that little bit of ta to the ha will help to clarify the beginning. So again, I'm going to play that C. I'll first play it with the ha, and then I'll play it with the ta articulation so you can tell the difference. So this is the ha, and then this is with ta. Ha, 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 ha. And so this essentially becomes that default articulation. When we don't see anything on the page, it doesn't tell us what we want or what the composer wants specifically, then that's what we're going to always default to. So again, if you play that C major scale, this is what it'll sound like with just a single tongue. The next really popular articulation that will be introduced usually is the staccato articulation. So again, using the single tonguing technique, the player then shortens the note length. This can be also achieved without tonguing. So it is written in music as a small dot, either above or below the note head. So using the example of C major, I'm going to put an example of what it looks like with the staccato marking right over here. So essentially you're going to see the little dots, and that just means that the note is going to be short. So again, you can use this with the tongue or without. Usually you do want to use it with the tongue, again, for that clear articulation at the beginning of the note. So I'll play you that C major scale with the staccato articulation with tongue. And then you can do the same thing with ha. And so when you do get into different ranges of the flute, especially in the lower notes, you'll notice that it can be a little bit trickier to do that staccato articulation. What I would recommend is, again, really using the support with the ha and using very, very light tonguing to get those lower notes. Because it can be easy to overblow those notes. So just make sure you're using really nice hot air, and again, a very light tongue, and mostly that ha. That'll help you to get that really beautiful, light, single tongue staccato articulation in the lower register. And then the next articulation that we'll primarily see as the beginner will be the slur. So slur is written as a line either above or below the note head, and a slur means that the player only tongues the beginning of the first note, but not the following notes written underneath the slur. This helps to give the importance to specific notes, so usually the first note of the group, as well as to change the emphasis of the musical idea. So So we can see slurs in all sorts of different music, especially when it comes to some of the older music like Bach, for example. We'll see a specific articulation written in to really help define the importance of different notes. So Mr. Wye really goes over that in his articulation book that I showed you guys before. This would be the Trevor Wye practice book again, but I'm looking at the book number 3, which is Articulation. I really like what Mr. Wye says about slur articulation. So I'm actually going to put a little bit of what he wrote right up here. So I'm just going to read what he says with the use of the slur. So he says, throughout musical history, slurs were most often used to add variety to a phrase and to put emphasis on a note, like I said earlier. So two notes slurred together add emphasis to the first and diminish the second in importance. Very broadly, a slur is a diminuendo, that is the effect of a slur on 2 or more notes. So the instruments of the 17th and 18th centuries also influenced how a slur was used. For example, the interval of a fifth or bigger interval was not usually slurred when playing on the flute. So this is because the instruments did not lend themselves to slurring large intervals easily, as our modern flutes often do. So I'll just play an example of what a slur would be if I were to play again that C major scale. So I'm just going to slur every 4 notes. So there, what you noticed is that I'll tongue the very first of the group of the slurred notes, but then I continue with my breath and I don't break it with my tongue, and I continue that musical phrase without tonguing it. So it really helps to give you that nice longer phrase. So now we're going to go into some of the more intermediate articulations. So essentially, the intermediate articulations are different combinations of the beginner articulations. One of the books that introduced me into the intermediate or different combinations of intermediate articulation would be the Taffanel and Gaubert book, known as 17 Daily Exercises. My cover has come off many years ago. I've had this book, I think, since middle school or high school. This book is really, really great. It's like the Flute Bible. So I would highly recommend you take a look at that. And what I really like is I'm just going to put up what this looks like right here. And essentially, it has different articulations written out. So we have 8 slurred, so that would you try to slur all of them, so that would be number 1. Number 2, you do 4 slurred, 4 slurred. 3, you do a 1 tongued, 3 slurred. I'm going to play some examples of that with, that C major scale. So as you already know, I already played the 4 slurred, 4 slurred with the slurring articulation. So I'm going to do it with the all slurred. That'd be all slurred playing C major. So if I were to play C major with number 3, so that'd be 1 tongue, 3 slurred. All right, and then number 4, so this is gonna be 3 slurred, 1 tongued. All right, and then number 5, so this is going to be 2 slurred, 2 tongued. So number 6 is the exact opposite of that, so it's going to be 2 slurred and then 2 tongued. Number 7, this one's going to get a little bit more tricky, so it's 1 tongue, 2 slurred, 1 tongued. And then number 8 is going to be 2 slurred, 2 slurred. Number 9, we have 1 tongue, 2 slurred, 2 slurred. So this is similar to 8, but we actually put the slur on the opposite note, so it makes it a little bit trickier. And then of course number 10, all tongued. And then what you can do with these intermediate combinations is, of course, intersperse them throughout your technique practice. So whenever you decide to play a scale, try playing it with one articulation. So try playing it all with number 5, try playing it all with number 3, for example, or try playing it number 7, and switching through all the different articulations with each different scale. So that's how I was introduced to learning the more intermediate combinations when it comes to articulation. If you find that visual might be a little bit too confusing for you, I'm going to put up another one here from the RCM that I find that's really clear in their technique book. It's just a chart essentially that shows you exactly what they're looking for when they'll ask you all slurred, all tongued, two slurred, two tongued, etc., along with the levels. So as it gets more advanced, that's the lower you get in the chart. So then once you've started mastering some of those more difficult combinations, you'll also get introduced to fast single tonguing. So just like we were doing before, but we're going to pick up the speed with the single tonguing. So again, you're using exactly the same techniques, but employing them in a faster way. So again, we're going to play that C major scale. I'm going to play it a lot faster. And again, this is just single tonguing. So just like we did before, but a little bit faster. So again, we still have that nice tonguing there at the beginning, but I'm also using a little bit of that ha again to give me that nice, rich sound. As flute players, we're infamously known for playing lots and lots of fast notes and lots of fast passages. So the single tonguing isn't going to be fast enough for all of those passages. So we've come up with another technique, and that's called double tonguing. So what you're doing, instead of just using ta, we're going to add the back of the tongue so that we have, essentially it's like you're teeter-tottering with your tongue. And you could do it with ta-ka, so T-K, T-K, or you can also do it with D, D and G, da-ga, da-ga. So essentially you're doing exactly the same thing as you're doing with the single tonguing, but again, you're adding that back of the tongue. So it sounds like you're tonguing it all really, really fast. So it's going da-da-da-da-da, but instead of you're going and a great way to practice this again is by doing it really, really, really slowly and only practicing with the weaker articulations. So usually it's the ka. So going ka, ka, ka. Eventually, as you practice that, you really want to make it even to your ta. So it's almost indifferentiable from the ta and the ka. I'm going to very slowly go ta, ka, ta, ka. So that is double tonguing. Some famous examples of this would be the Midsummer's Night Dream from Mendelssohn. I'll play just a little bit of that so you can get what that sounds like. So that is when you're using the double tonguing technique, because it'd be way too fast to do that single tongue. It would make it very unclear. So by using the double tonguing, it makes it sound really, really beautiful and crisp. And then if you don't want it to be so crisp with the ta and kas, like I mentioned before, you can use da and ga. So that just helps to soften up those syllables. So it makes it a little bit more legato. And then once you have mastered the double tonguing technique, all you have to do now is add an extra ta and you have triple tonguing. So similar to double tonguing, you're again using the ta, ka, but now you're adding an extra ta or an extra ka. So ta, ka, ta, 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 or ka, ta, ka. That one I always get confused. There we go. Another famous use of the triple tonguing technique would be Mendelssohn's Symphony No. 4 in A major, his Italian symphony. So I'll play a little bit of that so you can get what triple tonguing sounds like. And that's the usage of triple tonguing, which is really, really fun. I really love using that when I can, just because you don't get to use it so often. It's really fun. All right, and now we're going to go into the more advanced techniques. So usually this is going to be more of your extended techniques. So things like flutter tongue, even though you do get to use that as a beginner. So there's different ways for you to do flutter tonguing. So flutter tonguing can be used with the tip of your tongue, like you're rolling them. Or you could also do it with the back with your throat. So there's those two different ways for you to do flutter tonguing. That sounds like this. So that's a really fun technique. You can also be doing singing and playing. So that's also really, really fun too. So that was a pretty long video. I hope that you stuck around. Just to recap what we went over today. So we went over what articulation is, why we use it, some beginner articulations like the articulation, the single articulation, staccato, slurs. Then we did various combinations as well as double tonguing and triple tonguing as well. So as always, if you do have any questions about any of the articulations here, feel free to drop them in the comments section down below, or you can also check me out on my website, so you can send me direct message there at www.maylinjenkins.com. And as always, if you are having any issues when it comes to practicing, feel free to check out my free practice guide, also linked in the description down below. And if you really like this video, don't forget to press like, and also to subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this, and to click the little bell notification so you don't miss out on any other ones when I post them. So thank you so much everyone for watching today's video, and glad to be back. And as always, happy fluting!